Stefan, do you want to give everyone a little bit of an understanding of who you are, what you do, and I guess why we're here having a conversation?
Of course. So, for everyone listening, I'm Stefan, one of the co-founders of OneFit, which is a online coaching platform for coaches to manage their clients. And so I've been Reese and his team have been on board OneFit for a better part of a year now. We've been working very closely together in terms of, well, supporting his business and his coaches, managing their clients, but also a partnership perspective and us supporting Reese with any clients that he is working with or mentoring to make sure that they've got all the systems in place to support their clients and deliver a good experience.
With like going from corporate to OneFit, what prompted that change? Because that's a big vertical.
Yeah, so for me, it came from a number of aspects. So what I kind of found I was progressing really well with my career, like constantly knocking on the door, pushing for more money and promotions. But I kind of sat back one day and I was like, it doesn't matter how much I could push in a corporate career, I'm not going to make any serious money, or I'm not going to really make a huge difference in a corporate role. And then I kind of had a moment when I was 25 where I was like, I need to give everything I possibly can so that later in life I can completely enjoy my life and not essentially be working till I'm 60.
Hmm.
Because I come from a family like my parents, they did very well with their careers and they've always done pretty well. But they're still working in their 60s. And that's not what I want. I want to put the work in now so that I
Hmm.
can be rewarded for that later down the line. And so that's where it really came from. And it very simply started like I think it was the new year of 2022. I kind of set myself a goal like just start a side business. Just see how it goes. I've never had any experience in starting a business before, but just come up with something and see where it goes. And I I had an idea which was inspired from a number of elements. That was a coaching platform obviously. And that came, the initial inspiration from that came when I was in uni, and my housemate was a personal trainer, and he would like get me set up on the platform he was using over summer just to help me get into shape, and then over COVID as well when everything was completely shut down. And the platform he put me on was TrueCoach, which back then was the market leader back in like 2020,
Hmm.
particularly as online coaching started to boost. And my initial thoughts was, how is this the market leading platform? There's got to be something better than this. But I didn't have the experience or knowledge to do anything with that. And then as I got my COVID, also around COVID is when I started my career in tech as well. And I was working with the market leading software in the financial space. And each year I gathered more and more knowledge, and the more I was working with an incredibly powerful piece of technology every single day, the inspiration was, why not take this and put it into a space that I'm actually passionate about and I actually care about.
Hmm.
So I knew that if I was to start this business, that I wouldn't be able to do it myself, because, well, combination of things, but the biggest thing being accountability. I know I thrive a lot better having pressure on me and
Hmm.
not wanting to be the weak link in the group.
Hmm.
Um, I'm incredibly competitive. And so I took the idea to my mate, and he said, "Oh, my housemate has had the exact same idea." And just so happened the week before, like I met him for the first time. And then we got connected from there, and that's obviously Aaron. And that's really where it all started, and we were very much learning along the way. But yeah, that's where it all came about. So it kind of, I never really, the years prior to that, thought of myself as a business owner, but it was a natural jump for me because I'm so competitive. And I put this to the team the other day. My biggest priority with most things is I want to win. It could be, yeah, it could be as simple as like it could be as simple as like playing touch rugby. Like even though it's very chilled and laid back, I do not want to lose, and that was driven into me by my dad when I grew up because he's very competitive as well. So yeah, I think that's where it became quite a natural jump for me. And then, yeah, it was just the expertise and the knowledge that I had to pick up along the way.
I think that's something that a lot of people will probably maybe discredit or maybe understate is the knowledge acquisition in that transition is huge. And
Yeah.
it's such a big jump, like the vector from what you know now to what you need to know, and that's going to be the same across every business and same across every revenue bracket. But what did you feel like you struggled with most of like jumping that vector of like going from corporate to running tech? What was the biggest transition or the biggest struggle in that transition?
Well, pre-launch, it was very simply a case of like not really knowing what to do in terms of how do I set up a company, like what legal and things do we need to get in place, like even as simple as like getting terms and conditions set up. Just all these tiny little things that I've never have had to even consider. Like if and even like every business owner has to go through this, just like creating the logo. Like you should see the state of the first logo that I created with some random app generator on the App Store. It was just all these little things which I'd never experienced before, which is obviously why experienced business owners, that period from where we went from idea to launch, that would be so much more accelerated if we had have with myself and Aaron like had have done that before. Like if we were to go and do that again now, that year and a half period would be accelerated to like 3 4 months. Um, Obviously, assuming that the development can be done that quickly. But that was the biggest hurdles for us is not really knowing what to do and it taking a little bit longer and obviously balancing full-time jobs at the same time because in my day job, I was no, my day job was very full on. I had a lot of responsibility, and again, because I was competitive, I always wanted to be the highest billable resource.
Mhm.
So I didn't really help myself there because even outside of working hours, I was still doing that so I could constantly hit those numbers. But remind me the question again in terms of so there's obviously the pre bit the bit before but the differences between corporate and business. Remind me.
What was the thing that you struggled the most with, like that transitionary period? Because I think like to give some context to the question, I think a lot of people, a lot of people are going to be fitness business owners that'll be listening to this, right? And a lot of people are in this position where perhaps they need to transition, they need to outsource, they need to do something different, and there's gonna be some similarities going from corporate to running your own tech thing. So I think trying to highlight what you struggled with in that transition, in the outsourcing process, in the learning of new skills. Where was the parts that you feel like you wish you had learned faster or easier?
Yeah, and I think one thing that we um because Aaron and I had only ever worked in corporate, the way that we were running the business was very corporate approached. So
Mm.
being a little bit less aggressive with spending, for example, or not realizing that a piece of work that we were doing could be easily outsourced. Like the data transfers, for example. Aaron and I were doing that and just wasting time and hours on data entry. And that's obviously very silly because not only is it tedious, but it's not really revenue generating activities. Like it's a great service to add, but that's not something we should be doing. So it was just for us, it was identifying when we're doing these various activities that we should really outsource, like when we should do that. And taking that step to like, okay, we don't need to manage everything, we don't need to control everything. We can palm these tasks off and we don't need to micromanage every single element of the business. The biggest shock for me, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's about like the process of running a business, but the biggest shock that I had, because I was the last to come full time from my job. Um, and as I said, my full-time job was very for long hours, and obviously outside of that, I was doing one fit. The biggest shock for me is that when I left my job, I thought I was going to have more free time. I was going to have that cliche term balance or more balance, um, but I was completely wrong. Because when you get a bit of time off from your job, or like you got a quiet day, you think, oh, brilliant, I'm getting paid and I'm doing nothing. Whereas if I have a day when I'm just in the business and I'm quiet, I'm like, I'm screwing myself here. Because if I'm not finding like things to do or I'm not doing anything, then I'm not moving the business forward. And so that was a real change in mindset for me, and it's made things harder to um, take a break.
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, it's quite literally from the moment I wake up, I check all my messages that I get from the Aussies overnight whilst I was asleep, and then roll out of bed, and then yeah, on calls all day, have dinner, bed. So it's been very difficult for me experiencing that change from corporate to business, thinking that going in with the expectation that I was going to have more, but as every business owner does, like, I've got my own hours, I work for myself, I don't need to report into anyone. But it's a complete shock to the system that.
Yeah, massive. I think everyone kind of just gets that big wake up call that you end up just having multiple bosses now. You've all the clients,
Yeah.
all the customers, all the services, like you now have to answer to them, and it's an interesting process. Big transition for a lot of people. You said there that like you found that there was a gap in the market, and there were market leaders at the time that just weren't doing the job as well as they could have. What were the things that you did to try and actually identify there was a gap, and how did you fill it?
Yeah, and so what I kind of identified in those very early days where I had the idea, which was just quite literally just a better coaching platform at that point.
Hmm.
Um, we did a bit of digging, spoke to some coaches, and back then it was quite literally a 50-50 split between if coaches use Google Sheets and if coaches use platforms. Um, and why is that? Like we were trying to figure out like why do people not use platforms that are purpose built? And as you well know, because you were on Sheets for years, it's because you can do whatever you want. Like it's full flexibility, very data driven. And so that was really interesting to see that platforms historically just are incredibly restrictive. You have to shape your coaching around the platform as opposed to shaping the platform around your coaching.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, and the platform that I was working with day to day in the corporate world, we would quite literally have a team whereby we'd onboard the client and we would go through 3 month, 6 month, a year long implementation where we completely configure the platform around their needs and requirements. So, what data do you want to track? What reports do you want to visualize? What automations, notifications do you want to have? And all these different use cases and all these different requirements. So, kind of took inspiration from that in the sense of like, this is so customizable. People are using Google Sheets because it's incredibly customizable. Let's bring a platform which has the flexibility of Google Sheets, the data-driven aspect of it, but has the seamlessness and automation of a platform and a simple client experience. Because that's ultimately what the downfall of Google Sheets is the client experience. Uh,
Yeah.
have you ever tried logging a training session on your phone on a Google Sheet?
Yeah,
It's not
you
a
have to have some pretty crazy wizardry to get the sheet to even interact in the way you want it to, and it's if someone
yeah.
breaks one cell, the whole thing destroys. So yeah, I know that all too well.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was really where it came from. Just wanting to bring a platform that bridged the gap perfectly between Sheets and platforms. That was certainly the initial inspiration, or the goal.
Mhm.
Now, really, the goal is we want you. There's a bunch of different platforms in the space. Like there's a new one coming in like every few months, and a lot of them don't really do anything differently. It's just doing the same stuff, but just a little spin on it. Um, whereas, and then you'll get some that target like a specific niche, like Hyrox. There's like
Yeah.
a couple of platforms which are specific to that. But if you were like a bodybuilder coach, there's no way in hell that you could use that. So
Hmm.
what we really want to get to is that you could be any type of coach. It could be bodybuilding, powerlifting, Hyrox, lifestyle. You could even be like a sports coach, like a rugby coach. You could come onto OneFit, shape the platform around you and your style of coaching, and so anyone can use it, and it just gives you that full flexibility that you need. Um, so yeah, that's what our original goal was and what it is now. We want anyone to be able to use OneFit.
It's interesting that like the market of especially in fitness is it's probably one of the fastest growing markets still. And for years, people like coaches, trainers, and have just been screaming the same thing. Like we want a platform that's built for us rather than just built for like I think people uh oversaturate the simplicity of a UI and it's like, oh, we just want a simple dashboard, but it does nothing. And I think like correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd assume you guys did a fair bit of market research to see like what was out there and how the market was interacting with other people's stuff so you could actually one up it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We looked at all the competitors, and
Hmm.
had countless calls with coaches to really understand what it was that these people want because I've never been a coach. Like my, no surprise if you saw the state of my rig. But but I've obviously worked with coaches. I played semi-pro rugby, so I've been heavily involved in the fitness space. But I really needed to, well, me personally, I really needed to understand what truly matters to these coaches. And I feel like other platforms sometimes miss the mark with it. They're quite gimmicky in their approach. And it's been really interesting because we're obviously newer, we're not as feature rich as some of the platforms that have been around for 5, 10 years or so.
Mhm.
But what we truly focused on was instead of just ticking all the boxes and half-arsing it, let's just nail the core fundamentals, like the most efficient way of managing your check-ins, the quickest way and easiest way to build out your training plans while still giving you the flexibility to program what you want. So nail the fundamentals, and then we can tackle the nice to haves, like branding, for example. Like
Mhm.
branding's a big piece, which just kind of 2 years ago people didn't really care about, and now every man and their dog wants a branded app.
Yeah.
Um, and
I think
ultimately,
that's yes and no though, because like we spoke about this probably year and a half ago, is that they want an app, they want a branded app until they realize the problems that come with that. And like when the app is branded and something, let's say there is a very rare
yeah,
time where there is a service down, it's now their app that's the problem. And like, and
yeah,
customers come to like, hey, your app's down. Like you can't just go, oh, I'll find out what's going on. It's your fault. It's your problem.
yeah,
I've seen that come through with a lot of mentoring clients that have used previous apps in the past that were branded, and then things come through. Like if there's a problem, which there were heaps, it's on them, and the customer doesn't understand that it's not
yeah.
actually
And
theirs.
that's and app reviews as well. Like
Hmm.
I've gone onto coaches' apps on the App Store, and I've seen negative reviews which are nothing to do with their coaching whatsoever. It's
Yep.
purely about the performance of the app, and that
Hmm.
is just you. If you think about the psychology of a new client, where they've just paid this coach, they download the app, and the first thing they see is a 1-star review. That's an immediate red flag for them.
Yeah.
And so that's why we've been so apprehensive about it. Like we're going to add it in the capacity of as a starting point to the capacity of pushing your logo, pushing your colors. But in terms of your own app in the App Store, like that's something potentially down the line, but not as um, easily available in the sense of
Mm.
just like same app, just slap your logo on it.
Well, it comes with more dev problems too, the more downtime, more like server
Yeah,
issues. Like there's so many other things, like, you know, understanding the game of the back end of this. I think like the correct me if I'm wrong again, but that was a strategical choice to go. That can be a later problem because right now the functionality is more important.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Um, and yeah, so the point that I was going to raise as I was going through my flow, it was really interesting as we've continued to grow and speak to more coaches, how some people they'll be on a platform where it has every feature under the sun, but they'll come to us and their life just gets so much easier because they don't need all these little bells and whistles that they use like for 5 minutes a week. They need to focus on the 95% of what they're doing every single day. And if that's not streamlined, then you're just gonna have an absolute headache, particularly when you're looking to ramp things up, scale your business.
Mhm.
And there's been a bunch of times where I've jumped on calls with coaches and they said, "But do you have this?" And I'd be like, "Well, not right now. We'll have it in the future." And they'll be, "Oh, that's something I really need. I can't move over if I don't have that." And then 2, 3 months later, they message me saying, "I'm sick of this platform I'm using. Like, can I jump on now?" It happens so frequently, and it's sometimes it's quite interesting to see where some people's priorities lie
Mhm.
with their coaching. I'd actually be interested to hear your perspective on that, like how you've when you've spoken to coaches and like the systems they're using, like the differences in prioritization that people have and where it has been incredibly flawed.
I think in the last, say, 5 years, a lot of people, like 5 years ago, the industry shifted to a model where you had to be smart, you had to be educated, and just the to call yourself quote unquote a coach, you had to have some sort of proof behind you that you'd gone and learnt stuff. And you want the next step from learning stuff is data becomes everything. So the
Yeah.
industry over the last 5 years have just shifted to like more data equals good, and like irrespective to the client experience of whether that's overwhelming amounts of data, and so on and so forth. Like I look at the when we moved across to OneFit for the majority of the business, having we had a lot of people, especially our market being like more Gen Pop focused, like moving away from sheets. Not only just the user interface was good, but the simplicity of actually just being able to come in and log stuff. Now that works in favor of the Gen Pop client really easily. Sometimes it works against having simplicity for someone that's like a high-end athlete that is hyper fixated because the coach has trained them that way. It's just priority of data, I think, is the biggest thing. But to your point, is sometimes less is more. When you look at a subscription-based service, having access to a minimal viable product, like you imagine how long it would have taken you guys to build out the product as it stands
Yeah.
now. If you had gone, well, we're not launching until we have what we now, it would have taken you would have been cash flow poor, like probably negative for over a year because you would have just putting all this time into dev to have no feedback from the customer. I think like
Yeah.
the big thing there is like yes, the industry by far is data focused, and that's where they put their priority. But I've seen from time and time again with the businesses that I work with, when they look at more so the client rather than the data, like you figure out that the client is the superhero of the story and the data is not. And whilst yes, OneFit has a lot of data, right? Sure, there's going to be an infinite list of things that you could add of maybe data, could do this, could do that. But when you really ask the clients, like they don't care. Most of the clients just want to know if they're moving forward and is it easy to use.
Exactly. And I say this on calls to coaches, like at the end of the day, that like the client isn't buying into the system, they're buying into the coach, or they're buying to be taken from from point A to point B, and
Mhm.
they put their trust in that person to take them from A to B, in a way that's going to work best for them. They don't care about the system.
Mhm.
So our goal should just be really spend as little time in the app as possible, so they can just get what they need done, keep it a super simple experience, enjoy using it whilst they're in the app. Like you obviously get people who are uh, like more into it, like bodybuilders and things like that, that they like looking at their progress. They like
Mhm.
looking at like how much they've increased on their bench or how their weight has fluctuated over time. But Gen Pop people, the results that they see is when they look in the mirror. Like
Mhm.
a graph doesn't resonate with them as much as seeing a before and an after picture.
Mhm.
And so ultimately, our whole focus is just making things as simple as possible and as clean as possible from a client perspective, just so that, and then from a coach perspective, just as time efficient as possible. Um, but to your earlier point around the MVP, that was really interesting for us because we yeah we we were very much following like the lean startup methodology, in
Yep.
the sense like validate, validate, validate. Like there's no point bringing a product to market if you haven't validated it because you could spend a bunch of time like building a product that no one wants.
Mhm.
So yeah, the first immediate step or like the minimum thing is yeah the MVP, and we weren't expecting to have anywhere near as big as traction as we did when we launched our MVP. We were expecting like a handful of coaches.
Mhm.
But things picked up really quickly, and it was amazing in the sense of like how much interest we built up. But at the same time, it made those first few months quite tricky for us from a development perspective. Because if we only had a handful of people, fine, like we could just like rip it apart and like improve things. But because we had so many coaches and clients on the platform, like we had to go through two massive rebuilds of the coach and client app so that we could set it up for in a more scalable fashion for future developments. And that
Mhm.
took out a big chunk of like our first year.
Mhm.
And now we're in a phase where we're just ripping out developments like every other week pretty much.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think lesson learned from that was that we probably should have given ourselves at least 2, 3 more months. Um, and also one one big thing that I think you'll probably be able to speak to this as well, in terms of like when you're helping people with sales, like the sales process. learn to say no to prospects.
Hmm.
Like, because there were some very big coaches that um, we brought on the platform from day one, when the platform probably wasn't ready for them, and we should have been. I don't think it's right for you right now. In a few months' time, a year, we'll be in a far better place.
Hmm.
But like learning to say no is like, particularly when you're sort of so hyper focused on growing your business, is incredibly difficult, but a real art to master.
I think especially for most people that are in the startup phase, they get cash motivated and say yes to everything. And I think for smaller businesses, that's definitely that holds true that like anytime there's an inbound, like even for any of the coaches listening, like someone inbound inquires and you see that like, okay, their communication's horrible when they're even booking their call. They don't show up to the first call, they don't show up to the second, they finally show up to the third. Like maybe you should just say, hey, we're time to go. Like
yeah,
that type of person is not going to be worth it. And then like to your point, when you're presenting a product that is an MVP to a more influential person or a bigger account, you run the risk of burning that account before you can show the best version of what you have to offer.
yeah, exactly. And it's incredibly hard to win back those customers,
Hmm.
um, because they've got that ideology in their mind that your platform is still, whatever you're selling is still at the point it was when you originally spoke. Um, and so if you say to outright to someone, look, not right now, but 3 months down the line, a different story. They're going to have that in the back of their mind. They're going to be keeping an eye on every time they have a little niggle with their existing system. They're going to be thinking, oh, how long until I can make that jump?
Hmm.
And that it wasn't just the for the MVP as well. Like when we launched, we were like, oh, we're going to try and get X amount of coaches each month. And so for me, I was just like, I need to hit that number. I'll do anything to hit that number. And so I was bringing people on platform, which I kind of knew that they were probably going to churn after a month or
Hmm.
so, but I just wanted to hit that number, wanted to hit those KPIs.
Hmm.
And that very much has driven into me from my first ever job, which we'll get onto later, I'm sure. But yeah, it's we then, yeah, off the back of that, basically put us on a sales ban and was just like, right, only onboarding people that fit this criteria. Everyone else say no to. And
Hmm.
then we've then seen however many months later, pretty much all these people come back. Um,
Is that why you guys implemented like a waiting listing or was that just more so to create hype on the front end?
no, so the waiting list was because or the like the invite
Yeah,
only, there was like I'm not gonna lie, there was obviously an element of kind of building hype,
yeah, smart
and some
business.
like yeah. But really it was so that we could control who came on the platform. And if I got on a call with someone and I could tell they were going to be a complete time waster, or they're asking for every feature under the sun when they've got one client, and they've been coaching for 3 years, I know that that's probably going to be a bit waste of our time. And every piece of feedback for us in that stage is so critical. And
Hmm.
so we wanted to bring on coaches that we could work very collaboratively with. But and so yeah, one of our I mean, we've jumped on calls with you plenty of times to like run features by you and get your
Hmm.
perspective. But I think before Coach 2.0 release in October, we had calls with over 100 coaches. And so
Hmm.
it was just to be able to build those relationships with our coaches and make sure we didn't compromise the quality of development, but also the quality of support. I like to think that we're well known for how personal we are with the way that we work with our coaches, how quick we are with our response times. We want it to be personal. We don't want it to be robotic. So that was the main incentive, like not drowning in feature requests, like just being able to hone in on exactly what mattered.
Yep.
Um, so that was the main reason. As I said, there was obviously an element of hype.
Hmm.
Like,
But
kind of
also
build.
it also adds an element of like protecting the cohort, like status of, well, I got accepted, so therefore I am by default a better coach than what the maybe the average or the standard is. And I think then, whether this was intentional or not, the flow and effect of marketing from that is when someone posts that they got accepted, it's like, oh, maybe I need to apply. Maybe like how can I be good enough to get access? And overall uplifts the standard of the coaches that are on the platform in general.
Yeah, and in hindsight, there were probably plenty of opportunities for us to play that better from a marketing perspective. Like as simple as say like at the start of the week saying, right, we got these number of spots available, and then throughout the week giving updates on how many there are left.
Hmm.
Or it could be like the beginning of the month. So we very much did spin this narrative like in the first couple months that like we've got this amount of slots, like not from a marketing perspective, but in terms of like my outreach and like my
Hmm.
messaging and sales, we
Hmm.
definitely did spin that narrative. And then it was also helping like following up like towards the end of the month for people like there's this number like of slots left. And even pre-launch where we said we're only allowing 100 coaches onto the platform before we launch.
Hmm.
Um, uh, it helped from that perspective, but there was so much more that we could have tapped into with marketing. Ultimately, that just comes down to a lack of experience in that area. So it's been interesting to learn from that, and marketing is something that's certainly not my strong suit. I'm getting better, but
Hmm.
something that I'm trying to learn on every single day.
Is there anything that you look at across now, like, there's an array of coaches on the platform now, whether they're big, small, medium, and so on. But is there anything that across the platform, because you are so hands-on with the coaches that use the platform, that you can see similarities or commonalities between the people that are having quite high like client totals, people that are actually successful in what they do? Are there any similarities in the way they do things or what they do?
As in the big coaches.
Yeah, like if we were to try and I'll try and make sure that any of the podcasts that I have is to try and give people a little bit of a roadmap to actually being a little bit more successful with what they do. And being that you do have some pretty large accounts, is there commonalities that you look at some of the business models that are on the platform that are doing well, that people could start to embody to maybe improve the way that they run their business?
I think what's tends to happen with I'm not going off on a tangent here, but just building up the picture. What I've noticed with the coaching industry a little bit is that people try to like tend to move towards doing the bare minimum. Like they just think all they need to do is a check-in and the occasional message here and there. Like I've had a coach in the past where I got about the equivalent of 10, 20 minutes of their time for the entire month.
Mhm.
Um, the coaches that I've seen that manage like big businesses and have grown the quickest are the ones that have the most care for their clients in the sense that they truly dedicate the amount of time necessary to make sure that the client is actually being looked after in the journey. Like obviously, if the client is unresponsive and they're impossible to deal with, different story. But really building those relationships, and because that then leads them to have a higher opportunity for referrals to be sent their way.
Mhm.
There's been a couple coaches who came on our platform. One of them had 10 and he now has 130. And there was another one who had 30 and now has 140. I spoke to both of them, and pretty much all of their growth has come down to referrals. And that's ultimately from the relationships that they've built, the niche that they found. So one of them is his niche is like army, like people that are in the military or ex-military. And so he just spread like wildfire just from
Mhm.
like the results that he was delivering, the relationships that he built, all of those. And I know you have a great referral model as well. I know that's a big piece for you in terms of how your business has grown. That's where I've seen people scale so well.
Mhm.
And also cutting down as much admin time, and I'm not using this to tee up one fit, but cutting down as much admin time with the systems in place.
Mhm.
Like there's so many admin tasks which can be like cut down substantially if you have the right systems in place. Like obviously managing your clients, like building plans and things like that, they're going to work like make up the biggest chunk of your time.
Mhm.
But people doing check-ins, like having one tab with a Google form and having a sheet where they can track who's checked in, and then having a platform where they have to keep clicking around. Like it's just all time being sunk into unnecessary admin. And it's not just that, it's like from a sales perspective as well, like reaching out to people, like only keeping on track of it by looking in your Instagram inbox as opposed to having a CRM in place where you can track all of that. Like, so yeah, for me, the biggest things really is obviously going to be systems, but also the relationships that you build, like communication and using that to leverage referrals to grow your business and kind of put your reputation in the niche that you're targeting.
I think the less time you're spending on all the administrative tasks, the more time you can be spent actually communicating with your clients and being far
Yeah.
better. So it's people throw the word systems around a lot, but I think like actually like this whatever time you buy back with those systems, provided that time is then used to not just have what you mentioned before, balance and just, well, now I've got time, I can do nothing. It's more of a redistributing that time into client facing service and revenue raising opportunities. I've seen that be the major difference for most of the businesses that I work with. I completely agree.
Yeah, yeah, and a completely separate example from coaching. My cousin has just started dabbling with AI,
Hmm.
and for like he's worked in IT for 20 years, and he started to really get stuck in with AI. And he built this workflow where essentially it was for like a legal firm where it would look up the FCA, and it would pull an article, it would reshape it and go through these various checks and draft all these social media posts where these people would be manually doing that for every single piece of social media. And then, yeah, it would take them like 16 hours in total a month, maybe more.
Hmm.
And that like 15 minutes and that's that job done. And all that time that they've saved now, like if you think about it from a startup or a business perspective, like that's 15, 16 hours that you can now put into marketing or communicating with your clients or just upskilling yourself in a particular area like sales. Like time is the most valuable asset that any business owner can have, and we never have enough of it. And so anything that you can do to cut down on that is going to be absolute gold dust, and it's going to put you one step forward with the growth of your business.
It's funny that like there's this massive dichotomy between, try and make sure you still service your clients and be like a high touch, high communicative client coach, but don't don't automate all of the process. We want to save as much time as possible, and sure, automate the administrative tasks, the sales thing. But when it comes to client facing value, I think that's the one of the first things that most coaches will try and automate or outsource. And in
Yeah.
all the like, businesses that I've helped grow, that's generally the last thing that we move. And I think it's done a bit backwards most commonly.
Yeah, and I was reading something the other day where it's not completely related, but it's in terms of like the relationship building and the communication, where it's like the top car salesperson in America. And the reason why he was the top car salesperson was because every single person that he'd ever interacted with, he'd be constantly like checking with them and not like to say, "Are you ready to buy a car?" Just maintaining those relationships so that the second something came into their mind, like I need a new car, that's the person they directly go to. And
Mhm.
so that and people can see right through if communication is automated. Like I know because I've set up some email automations just to like if someone hasn't completed setup of their account, just to say like, do you need any help? And the response rate for that is like relatively low, and that's because people can tell it's an automated email. And so yeah, that piece as the majority of it has got to be left down to you because that's where your personality comes out, and that's where you separate yourself from other people.
Yeah, it's funny you say that the automation piece. Like we had we'd gone ridiculously down the road of automation with like client onboarding and client inquiries and acquisition stuff like that, to the point where we had an AI replica of my voice that would outbound call people, and it would go straight to their voicemail. They wouldn't be able to pick it up, and it would say like, "Hey, Stefan, how are you? Thanks for inquiring, blah blah blah," and it would pull your name from your inquiry. It would say all the words, but return on that, like the investment was huge, the return was minimal. And
Yeah.
we essentially scrapped it all, and we literally just shifted to a manual call, someone on the team within 1 minute of that inquiry, and like our revenue in that month when we just changed that one thing doubled. So it's like that you can make efficient, you can make everything more efficient, but most of the time that you come up with a trade-off of quality.
Yeah, and like even just like the fact that it goes straight to voicemail, like I'm looking at my phone right now and I've got like 10 voicemails that I
Yeah,
haven't
who
listened.
listens to them? No, no
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's changed. Like there's certainly value in voicemails to some capacity. Like it's better than like just not doing anything. But yeah, it's very uncommon to get any sort of response from a voicemail these days.
Especially with the market these days. Like most of the market that most of the coaches work with is in a younger demographic. where they're like avoidant of any number that they don't actually know. Or if they're older, they're like, I don't trust it, it's a scam, go away. So you kind of uphill battle from the start.
Yeah, well, I even experienced that. So because I was calling Aussies on my phone bill was ramping up very quickly, and so
Yeah.
I was like, I need to get, and also it's just generally like the speed at which I could call people
Hmm.
wasn't quick as I wanted it to be. So I got like a calling software where I had like a number, but it was like it was a corporate number, like a business number that you can tell
Hmm.
it's not a personal number.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd call these people and no one would pick up. And then so I'd do it on my phone, which people can tell is like just a normal personal number.
Hmm.
And then the response rate is so much higher. So
Yeah.
like people are so averse to any form of kind of cold call or like any inkling that it's going to be a sales call, a scam or anything like they're so defensive of that. You have to be
Hmm.
so not careful, but you have to really think about the way that you approach things.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to get no reward for it.
Yeah, one thing that we added to our inquiry process was to kind of stack the deck to ensure that we would get that callback, or we would get that reply. Is like throughout their inquiry process, the last thing when we ask for the number, we would justify why we asked for the number, just in the description of the question, rather than just like give us your number. We would ask, we'd add, and we did a bunch of split tests here where it was like, don't worry, we won't spam you. It's only for booking confirmations. We will give you. There was another one we tried, was like, we'll give you a call to confirm your inquiry. And there was all these justifications just to ensure that we got their number. And at the end of the day, just by having any reason is better than no reason. So if you can give them a reason as to why you're collecting the data, they generally will pick up the phone.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
there's so many things you can move with acquisition and inquiry stuff. It's cool. I'd like to kind of pivot a little bit. I think with OneFit and its direction and what you guys have described, we want to make the app that is usable by everyone in the industry. What are some of the ways that you guys are more on the strategical side, planning to become that app, the one that stands out from everyone? Like, what are some of the things that are, behind the closed doors, the conversations between you and Aaron? What are some of the plans that are in place, that not so much the things that you'll do, but what are the things you're thinking about of how do you try and take that vertical?
Yeah, so it certainly won't be like a big bang where we have everything like all niches immediately. It will be a step by step process, like tackle this niche, tackle this niche, tackle this niche. Like the inadvertently, we've done very well at the bodybuilding space,
Mhm.
just because a lot of our early coaches were bodybuilding coaches. So um, it helped us grow that element out. Like there's inevitably things like a full peak week functionality, which like we don't have right now. But in terms of 95%, we're certainly there. But there's gonna be a number of different elements. There's gonna be like the client management side,
Mhm.
which is obviously the biggest piece. And then there's the lead gen, like the business management side of things. So again, not just a client management tool, more like a CRM, like pipeline management tool for coaches, which covers all aspects, like even to the point where it'd be great to have, or like a goal would be to have like essentially MailChimp in the platform in terms of
Mhm.
like mass email marketing. Um, but the biggest thing to be able to really tackle all niches is going to make sure very minimally that we give coaches the ability to create their own metrics that they want to track.
Mhm.
Because we could have like a long list of metrics, which could be overwhelming, but there's always going to be one more thing that people want to track. I even spoke to a guy the other day who said he devised his own metric in terms of the calculations that he does. Like, how are we going to know that? So we need to make it customizable from that aspect, but make sure that we we make the platform scalable from a user interface perspective so that it doesn't become incredibly clunky, squashed. So that's going to be a big piece that we need to tackle. Right now, we've got customizability within constraints, so you can pick and
Mhm.
choose what metrics you want to track. Obviously, with like the weekly check-in form, you can completely customize that. But in terms of data points that you pivot data off of, what we need to get to the point is what's the name of this field? What type of field is this? What's the unit that you're measuring? Like things like that. So, or is this what's the name of this field? Is it a text field? Is it a choice field? Is it a number field? So people have that level of flexibility, and that will then allow them to continue to shape it around their coaching. And then there's also going to be an element of just working with these coaches and understanding what the best practices are for their niche. Like like the way that you program for High Rocks is very different to the way that you program for bodybuilding. You could give someone a 5-day split for bodybuilding, and that might not change for 8, 12 weeks. Whereas with High Rocks, it changes pretty much every week. So obviously the method of programming is going to be completely different. Even going into like rugby athletes, like you or any type of athlete, you have to take into consideration game day and all the recovery that you need to take into account, like game day nutrition, so on and so forth. Like everything's going to be different. So it's going to be a matter of tackling each niche one at a time, whilst making sure we're kind of laying the foundations of giving the coach to customize it around themselves, but pushing our best practices at the same time so that it's a system that they're not just going to break essentially. Um,
Mhm.
that was a big thing with my last role, because with the implementation process that we would go through, where we'd customize the platform around their requirements and the way they want to enter data and visualize things,
Mhm.
you'd get a lot of silly requests. And it was the additional value of what the implementation team would do is consult them in best practices and say, well, this is what your competitors are doing, and this is why they're successful. So yeah, learning those best practices for us and then pushing those best practices so that people can benefit from that whilst having the ability to make those little tweaks that is specific to them.
You said there that there was with the consulting process of here's what the competitors are doing, here's why they're successful. Is there anything that like looking at that as a model or as a principle that coaches could take and figure out where they could improve?
Certainly, yeah, and that's a big thing for us, that we want to work on in the next few months or this year in general, is we want to do what we can to make coaches better at coaching. Um, whether that is simple client management or whether it's other areas of their business, whether they need guidance with sales, marketing, etc. Because their success is our success at the end of the day. And even though I haven't coached myself, as I mentioned, the amount that I've learned from speaking to 1,000, 2,000, however many coaches is ridiculous. And like, I'll get on calls with some people and I'll say, is there anything I can help with, like outside of OneFit? And then I'll just speak to them about what I've seen other coaches do. So there's definitely an education part that we want to incorporate, whether that's with people like yourself, like partners that we're working with to assist them with um, various aspects of their business, or whether it's just simply like, I had an idea at one point of having like a OneFit expert call where you could book a call with a OneFit expert, because learning a new platform is very overwhelming, particularly for some people. Either they're brand new or they have been on another platform for 5 or so years. It's a big change. And so being able to see it from someone that knows the platform inside out and is actually using it day to day for their clients and seeing their best practices and the way that they do it, I thought could be quite compelling. So there's a lot of ideas on how we can help people with coaching, with OneFit and other aspects, just business in general. But we're very much going to have to lean on to get things up and running. We have to lean on our partners that we're working with and the experts in the industry.
If we wrap it up with one big question of if you were to look at running a tech business, what are some of the, let's say, three similarities to running a tech business to running a coaching business that you think that from a skill set perspective coaches need to be aware of or need to improve on?
Um, well, relationship building, because even though in tech you get very focused on like the product, building relationships is just as important, because you can have a crap piece of tech, but if you have a very broad network and like you've built some incredible relationships, you're going to get a lot more traffic than a platform that has a great product but no relationships whatsoever. In the same way that in coaching, if you're not building relationships with people and people aren't remembering like conversations they've had with you and like enjoy speaking to you, then they're not going to preach about your coaching and it's going to make scaling a lot harder. So yeah, the relationship and networking aspect is super critical and very transferable for coaching. I do think obviously systems is a big piece. Like I need systems in place to be able to grow and manage the business from particularly on the sales side, even just for customer support. Like when we had everything through Instagram, it was an absolute nightmare. The amount of times that the amount of hours that we lost was ridiculous. So yeah, getting your systems in place there. But I think sales is a big thing as well in the sense that it's very daunting for a lot of coaches because they get into coaching for their love of coaching and their love of like going to the gym, and they finally make that leap to like right, I'm announcing it, my coaching business is live, like, and they very quickly realize it's not just about the coaching, it's so much more than that. I put a poll on our Instagram a few weeks back saying like what do you wish you knew about like running a coaching business before you started it, and the two biggest things were marketing and sales. And it's a bit like how what position we were in at the start of the business. Like I obviously had experience in sales, but when it came to marketing I had no experience whatsoever. um, and so Marketing is something that can easily be outsourced. Same with sales, but at the end of the day, like if you're delivering the the service, being on the front line with sales, particularly in those early stages of the business, is going to be critical. And you need to make sure that that's something you're breaking yourself into. Like in my first job, I was broken in very quickly. We had to do minimum 50 calls a day, like 2 hours on the phone, like cold calling. And so phone presence became a really big thing, like something that grew for me very quickly.
Yeah,
But sales is something which is transferable to any industry.
I
It
agree.
is if you don't have sales, like your business isn't really going to grow. Um, so
Totally agree.
yeah, without a doubt. And I know that you support a lot of coaches on the sales side, even just like a case of like how you can look to follow up with someone or um how you can like utilize your referral model. But yeah, it's transferable to any space, and there certainly needs to be a lot more education, particularly for coaches, around sales, because if you don't have that in place, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Absolutely agree. Stefan, where can people find you? Where can people get access to OneFit? And what do they need to know about the app if they are on the fence?
Of course. So you can reach us at www.onefit.com. That's with the number one. And then Instagram, OneFit UK. Um, so if you're on the fence about coming onto OneFit, whether that's from what you're currently seeing of what we have in the platform versus what we don't have, best believe we are developing incredibly quickly. We have the strongest tech team in the industry, hands down. Our CTO, Ben, is an absolute machine, and the team that he has is incredible. Um, we're developing incredibly quickly, and we're working with some incredible coaches to make sure that all of those boxes that need to be ticked are going to get done and in a very quick fashion. So yeah, if from a stability perspective as well, I know a lot of people deal with like bugs, downtime, etc. That's not something you would experience with us. So yeah, we want to make sure that every coach comes onto OneFit is actually looked after, and they've come to us and they're going to leave, or they're going to not leave, but they're going to finish their OneFit journey at some point for the better, whether that's closing their coaching business or whether that's retiring.
Selling their business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
So
I can speak to that though. Like we've been with OneFit, it'd be over a year, well over a year now actually. There's been two
yeah.
scheduled downtimes of which we knew about 2 weeks early, and
Yeah,
it was at like
one
three
of
in the
them was
morning.
on one of them was on Christmas Day.
Yeah, but we knew about them, so I think like I can attest that from a user. All my team have been very happy with it. So, if you guys do want to do it, move in with OneFit, we'll drop some links below on all of the notes and stuff. You can find access to all of that. But Stefan, thank you, and great to chat.
Thank you, Reese. Appreciate it.